name is Ashley Garcia, and I'll be presenting Module 5 discussion. I'm going to start with Chapter 5, Question 1. Is there anything that is meaningful to you but that you find difficult, if not impossible, to put into words? And the answer to that is yes. My love for my daughter, I just love her beyond whatever I knew was possible, and sometimes that love comes out in like kisses, hugs, smiles, and I never really knew how to put it into words, and I simply just rely on nonverbal communication to express my love towards her. I struggled with conceiving her and had to partake in fertility treatments where we had a miscarriage with her first, and then a successful pregnancy with her, and after trying for 5 years, she's finally here. So that love and blessing, I just can't explain it in any other way than nonverbal communication. Question number 3, how potent do you believe is the influence of language on our lives? What impact has learning other languages had on your own thought processes? So I believe that the influence of language on our lives is extremely potent. In trying to learn Spanish, I've learned that not all words have an explanation or a literal translation. For example, there's a word that my husband says in Spanish. It doesn't have a literal translation, and he can only come up with concepts that are close but not exactly what it means. So, like in English, so it shows me that immersing yourself in culture is the only way to really understand the language, because with language comes culture, and honestly, we can't have one without the other. We have differing frames of communication, and the frames evoke and assume informal rules. The textbook on page 37 states, when witnessing someone in need of help, Americans will offer help, but if that offer is declined, Americans are quick to respect the other person's privacy and independence and leave them alone. These sorts of rules are quite different in many other parts of the world, where the rule is don't bother other people but help when you see a need of help. This shows us that within different cultures, the way we communicate our language changes the way that we act. Therefore, recognizing the language gaps and the subtleties in different cultures will greatly highlight the influence of language, both verbal and nonverbal, in our lives. Question number 7, if you're a speaker of multiple languages, think about times when you switch from one language to another while interacting with people. Who are you talking to? What point do you switch from one language to the other, and why do you think you and others do that, and what is the outcome of code switching? So for this question, I'm not a speaker of multiple languages, but I was really curious about the answer to the question. So I asked my husband, who speaks Spanish and English, and I'll be annotating what he said. He said he was speaking with his sister, and they would switch from one language to the other when it was relevant to the topic. So speaking of their grandparent that only speaks Spanish, or when talking about Mexico, they do that, he thinks, because there's a mental correlation between that culture and the language. He says it's more comfortable to speak in that language when speaking of someone that speaks the language, or the location that primarily speaks the language. The outcome of code switching is normally a mutual understanding of that topic at hand, and the textbook on page 148 says code switching is done to either converge or diverge from those around the speaker, and this seems to be exactly the result my husband knows. My husband, who knows absolutely nothing from the textbook and the material that we're reading about, said would happen. It is simply a correlation between the language and the culture. Chapter 6, question 1, do you know anyone who does not adhere to your use of regulators in conversation? Anyone you are acquainted with who speaks over you or always seems to interrupt conversations? In what way could you exaggerate your personal use of regulators to be an example or help that person learn how to participate in conversations more equally? My friend Samantha will interrupt me on a constant basis and does not adhere to my use of regulators in conversations that we have. I exaggerate my personal use of regulators to help her participate in the conversations more equally by letting her know that when I'm actively speaking, I'm not ready to move on to another part of the subject, and I'll tell her with either a moment of silence or a head nod to have her take her turn in the conversation. Question 4, use of emojis are a type of nonverbal communication. Which do you most commonly use? Any misinterpretations that you cleared up with words, or questioned if your message was received as you intended? So these are the most common emojis that I use. If I can get it on the camera. Showing you like flashes of them, but so one of them is the face, red heart, a sad face, laughing sideways face, and then the face palm and the crying emoji. So, some misinterpretations of the emojis recently that I have is the crying emoji that I use literally probably every day. Someone thought I was sad about a new development my daughter had, but in reality I was just expressing happy tears with the situation. It shows us that, like the textbook says on page 143, even when people share the same language, they don't necessarily share the same ways of speaking. A really good example of this is one of my good friends. She'll send a thumbs up when she's done with the conversation, and a lot of people send a thumbs up to agree with the conversation. And she'll simply just send it to end the conversation. She wants you to know that she's done. So that was an interesting emoji that she has misinterpretations with all the time. Anyway, when I was communicating to a friend the new development my daughter had in singing her ABCs, she stated that she would be happy, not sad about it, and I told her no, those were happy tears, and she stated that she would have used an emoji like that, but would have used a simple smiley face emoji. Question 5. Emblems are commonly used in daily life, but not universally understood the same way. What emblem do you use most frequently? Recall an instance when an emblem you used was misunderstood. Describe how you might have clarified your intent or improved your nonverbal communication. So an emblem I use most frequently is a sign for thank you in baby sign language. I have my daughter use it quite often, and it was misunderstood recently at her gymnastics class. I clarified my intent by informing them that I was teaching her baby sign language so she can communicate words that she might not be able to say just yet since she's only 1. And they were actually intrigued and wanted to know more about what I was teaching her. The textbook states on page 176 that emblems are gestures that convey a precise verbal meaning that is associated with them, and I believe that's exactly what thank you does, the sign, especially when used with a sincere facial expression or an expression that shows gratitude. So like, thank you, that kind of facial expression, body movement, leaning into it is just like thank you, and so I believe that you'll successfully be able to convey your verbal meaning that's associated with it. So that is my discussion for Module 5. Thank you and have a great day.